Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's special council meeting, 25th of June 2024. My first in the chair, and I'd also like to welcome Michael Larkins to the table as well. So, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
Right. So, for tonight's meeting, are there any apologies, please?
Just Councillor Reynolds is in transit. Not sure if he's going to get here in time. Just cover up the work.
Okay, thank you very much. 3.0, declarations of pecuniary interest. No? Nothing tonight? Right, point 4.0, governance. 4.1, adoption of annual plan 2024 to 2025. The recommendation being that in accordance with section 71 of the Local Government Act 1993, Council resolves to adopt the annual plan for the 2024-25 financial year. Can I have a proposal, please? Councillor Reid. And second one? Councillor Mira-Quesada. Right, can I open the table please for questions or discussions on the annual plan? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cup. I need to check this. Councillor Cup.
Thank you. Will we be updating the councillors at the June and the May session there?
We, through the chair, we will.
Thank you.
This went out Thursday, so it was Facebook 24 hours before the result.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mira-Quesada, Councillor Mira-Quesada.
Yes, thank you. It is a comment. I would like to just make a comment about the positive and the amount of projects that are under livable and inclusive community, which I think they're very positive. We have here the finalizing several strategies. This is page 9. I'm sorry, apologies for that. And one of the items here is the undertake a municipal playground audit and develop a playground upgrade and development plan. I just have a question about that one, if I may, for Mr. Eames. How does that look like, and what is the outcome of that audit?
Through the chair, we haven't settled on what it could be. We've seen other examples. One in particular is the Southern Tas Council has done, which to me at least would suit our needs. It's quite comprehensive. We did an analysis of all existing playground facilities in Glenorchy, and then provided a hierarchy of their role and function, and then a condition assessment, and then recommendations about what they should be based on the hierarchy, and then a staging of what order they should be upgraded and how. So that's, for me at least, that's a sort of end result we'd like out of it, but we haven't really settled on a determination yet. Something that Jess and Shane in particular, and Sonia, our management facilities and land improvements will play a key role in what we collectively want and how it's going to be delivered.
Thank you. If I may, a question as well. On the same page, item 3.3 is the finalizing the active transport strategy and commence implementation of short-term priorities and planning to medium long-term priorities. So two questions here, please, clarifying. Oh, first, I would like to know how did the consultation went because it just closed. If we had good engagement, that's the first one. And the second one is, so implementation of short-term, medium, and long-term priorities. We don't have that in the capital budget yet, correct? So this is just planning for it.
Through the chair, I'll let Jess answer the question around the what sort of engagement we've had or the feedback we've had. There are some, in terms of our longer term capital project scheduling, I'd say there are some elements in that would, I think, pick up on some of the medium to longer term priorities, but certainly not all. There's certainly been an opportunity to fine tune that once we've got the strategy resolved and agreed upon. But there's some things that are associated with active transport that have been an issue for us for years, so they were fairly obvious as far as some of the connection issues within and between settlements that are in our go forward capital plan. But I wouldn't say it's an exhaustive list because we haven't finished this project.
And in terms of the engagement, we promoted the Having a Say period through our socials and website. We had pull-up banners made throughout the Southeast Stadium and the neighbourhood houses, and one at council here that we also used it down at the Coles Plaza with a QR code on it, leading people to the survey. We had 89 responses on a Having a Say period, and two separate submissions from Bicycle Network Tasmania and Department of State Growth.
Is that the outcome you were expecting? Or?
Well, you probably always hope for more than that, but we feel that we did as much as we could to try and promote it, and it was an incentivised survey with the gift card prizes for participating. So we really tried things we haven't tried before to try and get people's buy-in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Sorry, through the chair. A question about 1.4, which is continuing to monitor business investment through research data, RBA, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, etc. How's that? I was just trying to think about how that relates to our regular monthly reporting and the annual report. How's that reported on?
Through the chair, it's not specifically reported on.
Okay.
It's more the genesis for that goes back a few years where we were trying to encourage particular commercial, more so commercial industrial development to go to the right locations in Sorell, in and around Sorell. And also it's a bit of a legacy out of the economic infrastructure strategy we did with KPMG on behalf of CERTA. So state government has done a fair bit of work around the labour markets and where investments are occurring and trying to match the two together, and also associate that with training as well, to really get the best model as well. So it's something that we started probably 10 years ago, principally through RDA TAS, through Gen Union, because RDA TAS were a contributing partner as well, the first economic infrastructure strategy we did in 2015. And so through that, and having the benefit of Oliver here as well, and his prior role with Best as their business advisor, it's just been helpful to know, to sort of analyse and know what is and also what isn't happening here in terms of commercial operations and where we are or aren't attracting, even to the extent of especially the agricultural sector through the irrigation scheme. So it's just But to go to the question, sorry, Chair, we don't actually report on per se.
Feeds into our strategic planning and risk assessment and economic assessment and that context. Is
Yes,
that fair enough?
that is.
And in a related sense, and it's mentioned later in the plan, where are we at with this Tasmanian Councils Association? Does it still exists? But it's in a reduced form.
Yeah, through the chair, the STCA does still exist. It's not all southern councils are in it. Glenorchy, Clarence and Kingborough aren't in it, and also Denham Valley recently decided to exit, which is unfortunate. But Hobart Council have been a good corporate partner in all this, so they've supported it throughout, when other metros have left it. And again, for I don't know how many times now, we're looking at the structure and composition of it, working out whether we need it or not, or through the Greater Hobart Plan, the Greater Hobart Act, whatever the terminology is, whether we can set ourselves up so there's no duplication and sort of fragmentation between what the metros and non-metros are doing. So the new Hobart CEO was on a paper for the STCA, which we've had, considering what's the best way to set it up. It's needed, but having two organisations in the south is unhelpful. And the whole irony of, through the review of the Southern Tas Regional Land Use Strategy, so the STCA have received the funding from the state to drive it, to deliver it, and we had to set up a steering committee. And we've got on the steering committee those councils, or representatives from those councils, either GMs or elected members from the non-STCA council. So actually, everyone's cooperating, it's going really well, we're miles ahead of the north and northwest. But when it comes to actually which camp they sit in, it's a different kettle of fish, but it'll get resolved. It's a very long answer, sorry.
Thank you.
STCA is a long answer.
But a good, well, glad to hear it. In terms of that regional approach is really important.
Oh, sorry for my chair. The other thing is that Hobart Council historically provided the admin support for the STCA,
Okay.
but that's now finished, and RDA TAS have stepped in and are doing it, which has been a massive help. So we've got continuation with Jen Newman helping, and she's a huge advocate for getting a more functional regional body up. So we're making good forward progress finally.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes, I've got one. Thank you through the chair. One referring to 1.2, what's the current status of council involvement in the Southeast Integration, Tasmanian Irrigation, Southeast Irrigation Integration Project?
Yeah, through the chair, unfortunately, just recently heard that the Tas Irrigation's request for federal funding was unsuccessful to continue to expand the scheme. So this whole project is around trying to separate out the supply of water into it, away from Tas water.
Right.
But there's a fair bit of capital cost associated with that, and getting buy-in from users upfront is easier said than done. But we're still a customer, a user of the water, and a partner as well, in the sense of do what we can to assist with the cause. And I'm arranging for a briefing from Tas Irrigation now that we've got the new council to all councils, because it's a huge factor in Sorell, and particularly around this extension to the scheme and the surety of water supply separate from Tas water is absolutely vital. But yeah, it's just unfortunate that the recent funding effort fell over.
Thank you.
Councillor Tracy.
Yes, thank you. Another question for the General Manager. Well, I think it's a question. I'm not quite sure how to put this, but following on from Councillor Nichols, we do intend to preserve the significant agricultural land only in this municipality, because I've just been told about that is concerning me. I won't mention it now, but it is significant agricultural that they are wanting to subdivide. Ribbon development, and it is quite, I'm concerned anyway, but it could fall through. The other, I'm not sure whether it's a question or not, on page 10, 4.3, Southern Beaches structure plan, master plan, that I'm very keen on having council progress at some stage. The stormwater and the, you're saying here that the stormwater and the on-site stormwater strategy, the wastewater strategy and the on-site stormwater strategy are forerunner to the structure plan for the Southern Beaches?
Yes, through the chair. Dealing with the Southern Beaches first. There's two parts that we will undertake this financial year coming up. So we're a bit hamstrung by virtue of where the review of the Sorell project has got to. So it's thankfully commenced, and they're in the process now as in the consultants of shortly we'll be releasing a state of play report for the south, and they're also in the process of actually now compiling the revised strategy separately. So the state of play report will come out, I think, around September, and then the strategy will get developed through this calendar year, go through councils, and will be out for exhibition hopefully by around sort of March, April next year. And because it's effectively a settlement strategy as well, that was the biggest issue as to why we didn't want to, and when we commenced the structure plan without having that updated regional view of, and particularly the Southern Beaches not being serviced. That's always been an issue with the likes of the Planning Commission and the State Planning Officer and any sort of development or rezonings or expansion of any of the footprint from Lewisham all the way through to Primrose Sands. So we're trying to be sensible and pragmatic around how we tackle this. So that 4.3 is something that between Greg and Shane, I think is a very useful starting point to get a bit of a capability assessment done of what land may or may not be capable of being further developed. So that will help refine the area that could be looked at once we get to the structure plan proper. And secondly, we can still commence in-house next year doing some competent engagement ourselves around how people view the Southern Beaches and what they do or don't want to see. So that actually would lead into the structure plan as well. That's
very, very important.
Yeah.
And so at this stage, we're sort of concentrating on infill. There's still growth down there, a lot of growth, and that's concerning a lot of people too. Further down the track, perhaps not near future, but if water and sewage aren't on the radar at this stage, it could be forced upon us with environmental issues. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. But the infill at this stage, and let's hope we're not supporting ribbon development outside close to, just outside the Southern Beaches business. Central CBD, that's what.
Yeah, through the chair. So there's a number of properties, a number of property owners who would like to have their land rezoned. They're quite significant land holdings, but through, I can't remember the last time now, a rezoning was put to the Planning Commission. It was quite a few years ago, and it was very obvious that by virtue of the existing regional land use strategy, which has Southern Beaches that has a low or no growth area, and that it's a statutory document, that land use strategy, the Planning Commission's a view that they cannot consider any rezonings in Southern Beaches that would sort of extend the geographic footprint or result in more development. So that's effectively stymied any rezonings for at least the last 10 years, and until the Southern Land Strategy is reviewed and gets changed, and that is the status quo. So certainly those owners who would like to do something with their property are quite frustrated and can't even get to the point of having their requests considered on merit. And obviously there's a range of views throughout the Southern Beaches about what people do about wanting to look like or function like. So it's just my view is that to commence a structure plan proper now without that regional sort of regional settlement footprint being established or settlement function being established would be a waste of time in many respects. So, but this other work that we're proposing, certainly between Jess and Shane, they came up with the proposition around us in-house doing some of the more values-based work this year coming up would be massively beneficial to us.
And the 50,000 that was set aside to sort of commence the structure plan, that is going into the stormwater and wastewater.
Yep.
So,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay.
Just one more, please, if I may. Thank you. On page 11, there is the mentioning of the development in projects. There's the second bullet point. It says development of a youth plan operating model for youth services. And if I may ask for clarification, if this is a young people's plan only, or is it a children and young people plan?
Through there, it says young people. So the definition of young person is 12 to 25.
Yes. And so what happens then with the children? So a plan. Is this part of this plan, or how does that fit in the plans that are being looked into? So under 12 years.
We don't have a plan for under 12-year-olds. That's not covered in the development plan. There's a social strategy which speaks to children and young people, so there might be things that come out of that in terms of the priorities, but we're not proposing a specific plan for children.
Is there a reason for that?
I think it's been quite strongly identified that the young people in terms of 12 to 25-year-olds, and particularly in the 12 to 19 year age group, is one that needs addressing in terms of having social and recreational activities and services to access locally. There are more of those types of things for children under 12, and the new Child and Family Centre is going to be a brilliant facility for people of those younger age groups to access, and there's a lot more programs available for them already than the young people, so that's where the priority comes from.
Okay, thank you.
Right. No more questions? Right. So can I put this to the table, and can I have a show of hands to approve this recommendation? Anyone else? Thank you. Right, we move on to 5, which is finance. So 5.1, the 2024 to 2025 rates and charges resolution. The recommendation being that in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 1993, the Fire Services Act, Council adopt the following 2024-25 rates and charges resolution for rateable land within council's municipal area for the period 1st of July 2024 to 30th of June 2025. Right. So, Robert, would you like to? Oh, we have a movement and second, please. Here you go. Councillor Campbell, second, Councillor Lyons.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I might pass to Steph in that she's done the bulk of the work and has started the bulk of the work with this. A little precursor to it is that councillors will recall that we looked at a few options when we commenced the rating process, the rate modelling, and considered a CPI increase of 3.1, council cost index 3.74, and the 4.5% is what we've settled on, and that 4.5% was predicated on our financial strategy from a couple of years ago, which is we reviewed the remainder of this calendar year. So the 4.5% is what was settled on. As far as further detail on that, I'll hand to our finance manager who did all the work.
Through the chair. So we are proposing a 4.5% increase to rates, which Robert's just outlined. Our rates have two components. We have a fixed charge and a variable charge. So the fixed charge has increased by 4.5% from last financial year. And then we have our variable rate, and within the variable rate we have four categories. So we have one that's the general variable rate, and then it's varied again for large shopping centres, and is one category. The second is industrial and commercial, and the third is daycares and schools. So there are four variable rates within the resolution, which is the same structure as last year and the year before we restructured. And then, so all of those varied rates are just based on the 4.5% increase or average increase across all properties. Then within the resolution, we also have the waste management services, which has increased by 3.1%, which is the CPI at the March quarter. In that, you'll see an additional green waste service of the 240 litre bin, which is the new service starting next year with a charge of $65 per property. And then there's the fire service contribution, which is set by the TABS fire service. So we just on charge that on their behalf, or collect that on their behalf. And then the resolution also outlines the instalment dates and the pay in full date for the next financial year.
Can I open the table for discussions or questions? Councillor Jeremy Starter.
Thank you. Yes, one question for Mrs. Perry or yeah, I think Perry, please. It is about the comparison with last year, please. So last year we have a sorry, I'll let it for you to please explain the difference between last year's and this year's rates. Yeah.
Through the chair, the difference is 4.5% on average per property. So we've had an adjustment factor come through this year. So that's where the Officer of the Valuer General adjusts property valuations. We use AAV as our valuation. The Local Government Act says you can use capital value or AAV, but Council has made the decision to use AAV. So that's been adjusted for this year. The Officer of the Valuer General sends us through the adjustment factors and we apply them. Some of them were quite significant. Some properties, like their values doubled, but we don't we have to use those new valuations, but we don't apply rates to those new valuations without changing the variable charge. So we essentially decrease the variable charge to make it so, although those property adjustments have come through, the increase is still 4.5% on average across properties. not every property will increase by exactly 4.5%, because that's not possible when all properties have had different adjustment factors applied to their valuation, and their valuation is what's used to rate off. So there will be properties with less than 4.5% and properties with more than 4.5%, but on average, our rates have increased by 4.5%, and we've taken, including the adjustment, taken that into account.
Yes, and just a follow-up small question. I couldn't remember the increase last year was, I think, 7%.
Through the chair, I believe it was 6.99.
It was, I'm sorry.
6.99,
6.9.
I believe. I wasn't
Okay,
actually
so-
in the manager position at the time.
And that's what I was wondering as well. So this year, the increase is less than last year, significantly
Yes.
less than last year, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Through the mayor, just the reason they're structured the way they are, we effectively have 4 rate charges. There's the general rate, which applies to most properties, and then we have 3 differential rates or 3 subcategories, and that's a legacy of our restructure applied in 21-22, where we had to compress 20 charge categories. We're trying to get it down to 1 as possible, and so managing the impacts of that, we changed it from capital value to AAV. That resulted in less extreme swings either way, and also we had to do a fair bit of modelling to work out how best to manage those properties who were sort of the outliers, if you like, in terms of the change from the one rate model to the one we have now. That's why we end up with the principally commercial properties who are have been pulled out of it and paying a different rate to most other properties. So residential property production, they're all paying a general rate. It's more you can see the commercial properties, schools and daycare, industrial properties that have a different sense of the dollar applied to them.
Thank you.
Councillor Reid, thank you.
We made this change from capital value to AAV. Recently, other councils, including Hobart City Council, has gone the other way and gone from AAV to capital value. Is it possible to sum up what the difference what sort of difference that makes in our case?
Through like going back when when Steph did the modelling for the 21-22 financial year, prior to that, so around, test my memory now, around sort of 14-15, local government offers were a little bit early, were pushing for councils to go to capital value. However, that trend seems to have abated, and certainly, and that coincides with when they changed the Act. So they were trying to, I think, quell a couple of councils that were looking to flat rate, which they were doing. And they made some quite distinct changes to legislation where they clearly state that council rates are a form of taxation. The same principles apply. And from that, when we did the modelling to compress out 20 categories to something more manageable and transparent, applying AAV produced far less extremes at either end of the spectrum than using capital value. So, and yeah, it's a bit of a peaks and troughs with trends and what councils wish to adopt. So there's still quite a number of councils using AAV, but it also has a bearing on what their rate structures have been, or the rate strategies have been, and how complex or simple they are. And some councils don't have a fixed charge, they have 1 cent on the dollar, and we've modelled different fixed charges, and there's a maximum fixed charge you can apply as well to avoid the opportunity for councils to flat rate. And we saw quite clearly when applying different fixed charges, the lower the fixed charge usually benefited those whose property weren't valued as high as the alternate. So it's a case of where you want to manage the financial pain, if you like. So
I think it might be one of the first to take on the capital valuation way back quite a few years ago now.
yeah, and through the merits, when I was in Tasman, we had one fixed charge and one variable rate based on AAB, and that is what seemed to cause the least amount of grief in that area. The council before me here went to different paths of capital value, quite a number of differential categories, but there's no real consistency from council to council how they set up, how they want to generate the rate of revenue they need.
Thank you. Through Mayor, in relation to the general rate, you said primary production falls under that. Can Ms. Perry provide some more context, especially with like agricultural properties since the remodeling of their prices have gone up? How do we write that? How does that come into the general?
Yeah, so through the mayor, I mean, it's definitely jumping if I get this wrong, but we determine how much revenue we require for operations each year, and then the rate software we have gets an average. So you set the amount of rate increase you need, and then it works out per property, and then across the category how much you require from each property. Like Steph was saying, that it's not the case that every single property just goes up 4.5%. Some are higher, some are lower, depending on the valuation of that property, and also the application, the adjusted value from the value of general as well, it also has an effect. So it's not a consistent 4.5 per property. But when we did the modelling back in the 21-22, the first outcome we wanted was to try and get one general rate, but by virtue of the variation in the cents of the dollar from one land use type, say primary production, to commercial was absolutely extreme. So, as I've said, fairly crudely, compressing them into one model just produced horrific impacts. And one of the ways we managed it was just looking at three different categories that we have. So, any more on that? You want to step around the query? No?
Through the chair. The only thing I would add to it is that primary production falls under the general rate of 4.1266688 cents in the dollar, which is the lowest variable rate charge. So compared to the other three categories that we vary, it's getting the lowest cents in the dollar charge. So it's not being charged an increased varied rate. It sits in that lower, the lowest varied category that we have.
Where like shopping centres, is that, am I reading it correctly, at that 12.79?
So they're almost triple.
Yeah. What the general rate is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Sorell?
Thank you. Yes, so Mrs. Perry, again, please. I couldn't hear very well. So you were preparing that farms fall under the category of the 4 point?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, is that correct?
Through the chair. They fall under the general, at 2.1, the 2.18, a rate of 4.126688 cents in the dollar of AAB. That's the general rate that is applied to primary production properties.
All right. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? No?
Yes, please, if I may. So I have a question, I don't know who might be able to answer it. It's about the difference between the rate that we're setting up for general And for the other ones that have it looks steeper, like the 12 and the 9, and I know you've answered that you've separated in the 11 here for each of the 3 groups. I know you mentioned that you've separated them for many reasons, but how come this one's so steep and the other one's low?
Yeah, through the minute, it dates back to that 21-22 restructure where, with the 20 different charging categories, there was, multiples of 10 difference from one type of property to another that we were charging the rates on. So, we made some judgment calls about, what was sort of fair, equitable and transparent, and the result of these 3 differential categories which have a higher cents in the dollar charge from twice to 3 times the general rate. If they are reduced, then it just makes we need to offset that revenue somewhere else, which is the general rate, so it means the general rate would have to go up. So we're just trying to, it was just a difficult proposition to restructure that rate approach we had for the 10 years prior, and do it in a way where there was no significant increase in some. It was just an impossible task. So that's why the commercial, industrial, schools and childcare centres have a proportionally higher charge than all other properties combined.
So was the way it was increased last year the same as this year? So we're going from 4 to 12. Is that what happened last year as well? For example?
No, through the mayor. So the cents in the dollar, it would have been proportional. So just, the structure hasn't changed, but the cents in the dollar would have changed, and that just comes from how much rate revenue we want to generate. So I couldn't tell you that checking what last year's cents in the dollar were for those 3 different categories, but we haven't sort of manipulated those categories separate to the general rate. It's just we put the increase that we want from all rate revenue into the rate software, and it generates the cents in the dollar for us. So
yeah, so the other way around. So we work on the 4.1, and then what's left?
the 4.5.
I'm sorry, 4.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Oh, sorry, I jumped in there. I was saying 4.5%. So I might get just to clarify your question again.
That's okay. I'm fine with.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Through the chair, I just agree with Robert. So proportionally, like the actual cents have changed, because we have to remodel them because of the adjustment factors and the 4.5% increase that we have applied. But proportionally, there would have still been that increase to those 3 categories. So last year, the rates resolution still had the subcategory, the 3 subcategories, and proportionally, they would have been an increase from the general.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Can we have a show of hands to this recommendation, 2024-25 rates and charges resolution? All those in favour, please? Yes. Thank you. Right, moving on to 5.2, 2024-25 rates and charges policy. The recommendation being that the council resolve in accordance with section 86B of the Local Government Act 1993 to adopt the amended rates and charges policy. Can I have someone to Councillor Campbell and Councillor Nichols, please? Would you like to?
Through the mayor, it's, again, it's something that Steph and the team have done. So we're required by the Act to have a rates charges policy, and we're required to update it every year. Steph has conveniently identified in yellow the changes that have been made. It's really just fairly basic updates only. There's nothing significant. It hasn't really changed massively, really. It's in 21, 22 when we restructured the rates.
Through the chair, the only main changes in it are we've included some information about the new green waste service at 7.7 and at 10.1 we've added a sentence about the charitable remission, just requirements for if you're going to apply for one. At 11.1 we've updated the dates of the instalment and paid in full. And we have made some slight changes to 12.4, which is talking about if a ratepayer writes in for a remission on their penalty and interest as they pay rates late, criteria for all the conditions that must be met in order to approve the remission of the penalty and interest. And we have just added in there a few sentences about considering exceptional circumstances. And because before we just had one criteria, which was a good payment history, but we have found over the last couple of years that sometimes there are certain circumstances that need judgment calls rather than specifically meeting that good payment history. So we've added in some statements in there that cover those exceptional circumstances so that as manager of finance, I can make a judgment call as well as looking at their good payment history. And yeah, they're the only changes, nothing significant.
Any questions on this policy? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you. Yes, today we received a letter from a farmer with a proposition of different ways of charging rates to support farmers and reduce the burden of rates on that. And I was wondering if in this policy, is there anything or if council has thought about or discussed asking some of our ratepayers what propositions they have or what issues they're facing with the rates and bring some innovative maybe ways of structuring the rates. Maybe the question for Mrs. Perry or the general manager.
I'm happy to answer the question there. I don't think I'm going to shock anybody when I say that nobody wants to pay rates. And everybody would like to pay less than somebody else. But I guess that was the issue we addressed back in 21, 22. We would have addressed it earlier had it not been for, in reverse order, COVID, and then prior to that, trying to go through a merger process with our southern neighbours. So it would have been something that we'd applied a lot earlier than what we ended up doing. But I guess we need a certain amount of revenue to run our operations, and how you extract that out of ratepayers and out of their properties is always a vexed matter because, like I said, people begrudgingly pay their rates and will do anything they can, and I'm not being facetious around reducing that obligation in a financial sense. So, we had, with the rate structure before that was in place for the 10 years when I got here, there was certainly, it was set up in a way where council made judgment calls as to which types of properties should pay more or less than other types of properties. And certainly the primary producers were in the lower categories compared to others. And so through that process of considering how better to structure it so it was more consistent and transparent, we ended up with what we just adopted. So, and like I said, it had the impacts of compressing 20 charging categories into one being less severe, we would have avoided the need to have the extra 3 differential categories that we've had to keep. But it becomes quite challenging when we're making judgment calls on people's capacity to pay and what sort of properties can or can't pay more or less than other types of properties. So, like I said, the government went through a process about 10 years ago to really clarify that despite the efforts of a couple of councils who were keen to do it on a flat fee, flat rating approach for residential properties, there was, that it's a form of taxation principles apply, which is, in coarse terms, the more valuable the property, the more you pay as a rates contribution. So that doesn't sit well with all, which I accept and acknowledge, but it's very difficult to create a rating approach that is absolutely consistent and fair for ratepayers. And as soon as we start to favour one type of property over another, well, you're making some pretty big judgment calls on people's capacity or ability to pay, and it's very, it's something I recommend council steer clear from. But if it's something's a matter we can certainly go into, and I accept that there's a number of councils around the table that weren't here when we did the restructuring. That was a massive process to do that and to try to model in a way that had the least impacts. It was many months of number crunching, excuse me, and it was never going to be perfect. It's, like I said, 20 categories into one is an impossibility, especially when the extremes of the charging from one category to the other was, in some cases, 10 times that. And so how you can go to one rate payer and say, it's fair that you pay 10 times the rate that this other property pays, and heading down the path of fee for service and what we do or don't get it, it becomes a fairly convoluted process trying to unpick that in something that's fair and transparent and be quite equal to all. So it's not simple.
Could I just, following on, General Manager, the appeal process through the Value General, what do they take into account? Do you know?
Through the I haven't done it. I've had plenty of people who would like to throttle me. It's one of the few chances I get to point to a different director and say, go and talk to them, which is the Office of the Value General. So I've certainly had people come back saying that they were successful, that they were able to do that.
I've heard that.
But as to what evidence you need to bring to have a successful, for a better term, successful case considered, I actually don't know how they go about it. But there's it's not an uncommon occurrence, challenge, objecting to the evaluation, and I don't know exactly how specifically they do the evaluation. It's done at the desktop level. I certainly contract it out now and have done for quite a few years. And where ours is due this next financial year now, we should have been done already, but we were pushed back for a few reasons. So, I think the prior approach from years ago when it was done by the government and valuers would go to each property, and I think those days are gone. But yeah, I've never actually sat in an objection.
Like you, I've heard of some successes.
And I don't know if they just make sort of small immaterial adjustments, or if they actually make something that's significant.
Thank you.
Anything else? In which case, then, can I have a show of hands to the recommendation, please? All those in favour? As unanimously. Right, page 28. Financial hardship assistance policy 5.3. Recommendation that the council resolve to continue to offer and implement the revised financial hardship policy. Any questions? Councillor Larkins.
Second.
I'll move in a second. Councillor Reid. Yeah, Councillor Larkins. Any questions? No. No, Councillor. Okay. Are there any questions or comments on this policy?
Seems decent, thank you.
Yes.
Through the chair, this policy came about during COVID, and this year, we've made no major changes to the policy. We've just taken some of the COVID references out and made it more general because the pandemic is no longer, or at the moment, and touch wood. And we've also, we had in it that it was to be reviewed by council annually, but now it's established, we have changed it to a 3-yearly review.
Just through the benefit, mate, for the benefit of the more fresh councillors, I'll rephrase that, the newer councillors, sorry. The policy was developed by the Local Government Association at the time of COVID, so it was uniform across all councils, which made it a lot easier. But it's also, having said that, it's also quite challenging to satisfy too. It's the threshold's fairly stringent as far as demonstrating to have genuine financial issues that require assistance by council beyond the standard things we do.
Can I ask if we have many approached council for this sort of assistance?
Through the chair, I believe we have a couple of ratepayers who are on payment plans in accordance with the financial hardship policy at the moment. We did have a few handful during COVID as well, or during that period of time, but not a significant number. But yes, definitely some ratepayers do access the policy.
But through COVID, we had some inquiry, but no one actually was satisfied.
Yeah.
Interesting. When they thought it was going to be really required, I think the government financial assistance probably helped a bit, but yeah, there hadn't been many that really satisfied to the extent that it was set out for to start with.
Yeah,
Councillor Reid.
thank you. On page 34, at 3.2, the first dot point there is evidence qualifying for job seekers support. Does that infer that all people on the job seekers support qualify, or is it just one of the factors?
Through the chair, I believe it's one of the factors, and then they have to depend on the forms, the form has outlines it a bit more, which is on the website, but I would have to, I'm not.
Having said that, job seeker is already well aware that it's insufficient for most people, and particularly someone who's paying rates, you wouldn't imagine, they'd be in a financial position to do so. So it's interesting.
Through the chair, the policy says that it may include one or more of the following, so it's not inferring that job seeker support.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Right, could I put that recommendation to the vote then, please? All those in favour? Again, unanimous, thank you very much. Page 38, 5.4, the 2024-2025 operating and capital budgets. The recommendation being that the council resolve to section 70 and section 82 of the Local Government Act 1993 to accept and adopt the 2024-25 long-term financial plan operating and capital budget estimates. Can I have a proposal, please? Councillor Reid and the seconder, Councillor Nichols. Thank you very much. Robert, would you like to address that?
Well,
Where would you like to start?
Through the mayor, it was quite an evolution of the process for preparation this financial year. So commencing with the finance team running through current budget performance with all the work group managers and looking at requirements for the next financial year. We also did quite a fairly comprehensive review of the long-term financial plan assumptions as well, taking into account the thresholds that are inherent in that and what our asset renewal requirements were as well. So we're quite content that it's representing what we require, what we can achieve. I should point out, and I'll get Steph to talk to it, because she's done the bulk of the work with you, so I just tried to nominate her as the least amount as I could. But from the last workshop we had with the council, where we were looking at a forecast operating surplus of around $150,000, you might notice that what it is proposed as is an operating loss. And the reason behind that is because of just for a change, the 11th hour, our friendly federal government decided to pay us, it's 85% of next year's financial assistance grant this year. So we've received quite a considerable amount of revenue prior to, and it has to be reported in the financial year it falls. So it's showing an operating deficit, but in fact it's a timing issue courtesy of our friends in the federal government. I'm sure if you want to say any more about that, Steph will put that more clearly than what I have.
Through the chair, Robert explained it clearly. Of course, like I believe he explained it clearly, but it is a confusing situation. Essentially, with operating the financial assistant grant, the operating grant, you recognise it on a cash basis. So when you receive it in the bank, and the federal government has advised us that we'll receive 85% of the 24-25 financial year grant before 30 June. So it's about 2.3 mil, I believe. It's a significant amount. So we would have had that budgeted as income in this budget, but because we've received notice of that, it will actually be recognised as income in the 23-24 financial year. So they do tend to pay prepayments. Historically, they've always paid prepayments. The last couple of years, they've paid very significant prepayments. 85% is a very significant prepayment. So there will potentially be a prepayment in 30 June 2025, which will then mean that we're not in a deficit, but it's difficult to budget for that because it's unknown. So we take a conservative approach with our budgeting, and we just assume that it will be paid in the year that it relates to.
Certainly through the mayor, Stephanie, with our long-term financial plan for the years in advance, we always assume we'll get it in the year supposed to, otherwise it makes it impossible trying to forecast your financial position, especially when they change.
What do they do?
That's a very good question, Councillor Trent, and I don't have a cogent answer for you, sorry.
Through the chair, I believe it's a policy decision to make it easier for everyone. But in what
What's the
way?
difference? Sorry. It just makes my finance manager angry.
Gets it off one set of books onto another.
It's definitely a comprehensive document. Lots of, I applaud the forward planning. Councillor Marissa.
Thank you. A quick question about the capital income, the grant income. Just to locate it, it's at page 46. Down below it says capital income, grants capital, and it says contributions. Is that where this grant we're talking about is going to fit?
Yeah. through the chair. So the grant that I'm talking about sits in operating income, grants operating. What you're referring to, so in capital income, there's grants capital. So that's federal and state grant funding for new upgrade asset projects. So if it relates to the funding of capital projects, then it's recognised as a capital grant. If it relates to operational activities which have no, operational activities, that sits up in operating income. But when you're referring to contributions, non-monetary assets, that actually refers to donated assets, so assets that from development. So we've had significant assets from development recognised this financial year. At mid-year budget review, we had about 8.5 mil, but it's looking to be about 10 mil by the end of the financial year. And so we've budgeted for 2 mil next year because it's really difficult to predict. And normally we don't budget anything because it is difficult to predict. But our development engineer did some modelling on it, and he came up with an estimated figure of 2 mil for that. So that's why we do have a budget in the financial year. And the reason why the capital grants is so significantly more this financial year than last financial year is largely due to the Jobs Hub, which I believe are recognising 4 million.
Yeah,
four to 4.5 million in grants for the Jobs Hub.
Okay.
So that's why there's that increase there.
So from 7, is that correct? From 3 to 7?
Yeah, 3.5 to 7.8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? We can't put that to the vote then, please. All those to approve? Happy with the operating capital budget, please show of hands. Unanimous. Right, that brings us to the close of the meeting. That'll do. Thank you very much. So I'll close the meeting at 6:10.
Well done. Well done.
Interesting.